Hello and welcome to Zion's Finest. This is episode 84. I am JK. I'm taking over the mic today. I am joined with my good friend Kenny K. Brown
Hello, everyone.
and Scotty Scott Scotterson.
I noticed that I'm not the good friend. I'm just Scott. So thanks for that.
And I'm joined by my good friend Scott Nielsen.
Well, now that I've said something, it doesn't count, JK.
And today we're going to have no tomfoolery. We're going to have a really cool episode. We do want to congratulate Matt Bronson on winning the West Coast Open. He went eight Swiss games, won them all, 8-0.
It's not
Crazy.
wild. And he was running Plo Cam and Han Kanan. And he ran mostly Plo Cam, which is a list I am increasingly loving in the new meta that we are expecting.
That's crazy. What's really funny is we're not going to really talk about that much in this, but I think it's because it fits into some funny things. But it's really cool. It's such a cool list.
Yeah.
What we are going to talk about today is we're going to talk about balance, how balance works, where balance fits, and we're going to do it through Kenny's eyes and Dota. Dota is Defense of the Agent. It is Kenny, how do you describe Dota for anyone who has not played Dota before?
So if you have played or heard of League of Legends, it is Dota and League of Legends are in the same family of games. What they are is you have a team of players. So typically you'll have a team of 5 versus 5. And the idea is that it's a very intensive strategy hero game where what you're trying to do is destroy your opponent's ancient is what it's called. And these games are famous for being very high skill, extremely high skill cap with lots of heroes, tons of hero pool. And what that makes for is really interesting and dynamic metas if the game is functioning properly. So great. It's a computer game, obviously. Great game. And that's kind of going to be the lens that we're going to be talking about with this one.
For sure. Scott, have you played Dota?
I've played a MOBA. I played Heroes of the Storm for a second, but I've never played Dota.
Heroes of the Storm is also fantastic. I have played thousands and thousands of hours of Dota. I have played League a little bit, and I have played a lot of Heroes of the Storm. Not as nearly as much as Dota, but these are my kind of games because they are the same thing. It's very grindy. It is just about, mastering a few heroes and playing with and against other players. Just absolutely my kind of games.
Yeah, we're going to lean heavy on Kenny. This is a Kenny brainchild episode, but the parallels are going to be are very clear once we're going to get into it. It might take a second for them to become clear, but on top of everything else, you are balancing 3 lanes, which that's typically what you're doing in Shatterpoint. You are balancing these groups of activations, groups of objective points, and you are trying to find ways to have your units go get things that you didn't have and make sure that your opponent can't get things that they want. Let's jump into it. The first thing we're going to talk about is what makes a unit or a faction balanced the right way. And we're going to talk about this in 2 different ways, which is intra and interfaction. Kenny, what are your thoughts? What is intra? What is interfaction? Give us the high level of this.
Okay, so the high level of an intra-faction balance is that things are balanced against other things in their faction. So we are thinking about things like Snips and Barris, or Snips and Rex. We are thinking about things like Kanan and Hera, or Kanan and Princess Leia, right? Whereas interfaction balance is thinking about when you've got these archetypes, these factions that are playing against each other, how are they balanced against each other? So, for example, when the game was first released, the interfaction balance, in my opinion, was a little off because what we had was Dooku and Grievous were very strong. They were balanced against each other, right? They were very strong. And the interfaction balance was they were being played against Anakin and Kenobi, Obi-Wan, and Anakin and Obi-Wan were not as strong, right? So even though Anakin and Obi-Wan, when the game was being tested, might have been thought to be fine, right? Comparatively, those things that they're at a roughly equal power level. When you're comparing them to this interfaction analysis, it's like, oh, these things are not as strong as the other things, right? So even though it can feel like something is balanced properly in terms of when you're list building with it, you're thinking, oh, I'm trying to decide whether or not I take Snips and Barris. That's a great. I'm going to lean on that example because it's such a good one because they are very different kinds of secondaries. They seem like they're similar in terms of they got the same health, they are mobile, but that is kind of where the similarity ends. They are doing very different things in your list, but most of the time, I think most players would agree, they feel really balanced against each other. So that's just kind of that's a high level view of thinking about balance, unit and faction balance.
Beautiful. And specifically, there's three things we're gonna kind of talk about in this, and that is going to be synergy, roles, and map rotation. We're gonna talk about map rotation the least, just because basically you always have to call it map rotation as long as odds is alive.
Yes, exactly.
Odds is such a unique thing that we have to talk about it. Synergy is its own thing that Shatterpoint is, I don't know, built on is the right word, but they really want synergy. They want things to work well with each other. And then roles are a thing that we're going to really talk about this in this thing.
Yeah.
But Scott, if I was to give you a unit to say that is the best, most synergistic unit out there that might be really, 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 really good, what do you think you'd say?
So it's hard to name one, honestly, because I could say that Gideon Hask. It would probably be somewhere between Gideon Hask, Iden, and the Death Trooper escort. And the reason is that when we think about what we mean by synergy, right? It's that them being together, them working together, creates more than the sum of their parts, right? And in terms of the Iden's identity, where if you're Empire, you get to move after you wound and heal and give out conditions. Gideon's Hasks, where if you're within 5 of a scout, you get the strike. That's amazing. Death Trooper Escort is giving out movement to supporting units. I would say probably Iden, just because she has her start of beginning that she's giving out movement to scouts, and then her identity as well. And then the fact that, and partial credit because she is a scout who is also procking Hask's ability, but it's sort of like silver and gold ain't no losers here, ladies.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Completely. We talk about it a lot. If you are a first time listener to Zion's Finest and you picked up today for some reason, you should learn very early that we talk about Inferno a lot as the cream of the crop. It didn't win. It doesn't win all the time because Shatterpoint is a game of skill and there's a lot of things to it. But the Inferno squad, which is Iden, Hask, and the ISFs, are intra-faction just pushed up because they play off each other, they work through each other, and they just make every single person better because of the things that they do. Can you talk about the intra-faction of Inferno Squad really quick?
So here's the thing about Inferno Squad and this intra faction. So what here's a really good example. So, and Iden's also a very good example. She is a very good example, in my opinion, Inferno is, of an imbalance intra-faction and of an imbalance interfaction. But here's the imbalance intra-faction. The issue with this is that Inferno Squadron is better than any other squad that you could take in Galactic Empire, right? We think that the Moff Death Darks is also a very good squad, and it honestly has two of the best units in the game in the Death Trooper and the Dark Troopers. But there is no dispute that if you are only going to be able to run one of these squads, most competitive players who are thinking, I'm going to grind to win this thing, are going to be taking Inferno Squadron. And the problem here is that this means things like Veers, Thrawn, Vader 2, well, all of these things have to be played with Inferno Squadron generally in order to have like a chance in the competitive meta. So it makes your list building considerations a lot less interesting if you're running Empire, because you're thinking, like one of our brothers, Sean Piccone from Canada, one of the lists he loves is Thrawn Moff. It's a very cool, very interesting control list, and it is a very good list. But I think even he would acknowledge that Inferno Squadron just brings so much power that even though it's doing something totally different from what he wants to do, most of the time it's probably better to just take Inferno Squadron, right? So it is intra-faction, it is balanced very tightly against itself, but that is push, like you said, and then intra-faction, it's just way stronger than everything else.
Yeah. And one of the big things that that it has done, it is, yeah, the interfaction balance is where we're going to get into really quick, because there are things that are balanced intra-faction, such as our friends Leia and Logray.
Great example.
Leia is hits like a tank, really tanky, uh, has cool abilities. Logray, if you could synergize him in other places, is arguably the best primary in the game with his ability to do things. But they are balanced inside themselves, and they die to Inferno Squad. And since Inferno Squad is so busy, there's nothing else you can do about it.
Yep.
On top of that, as Scott was talking about, and Kenny, they are joined by the other best box in the game for all intents and purposes.
Yep.
Moff and Death Troopers and the Dark Troopers they have everything to support it on the other side. And Leia and Logray have C-3PO.
Yeah.
So the second part, the second part, I'm not going to talk about anymore, because yeah, you can put them on the playing field against each other, and you'll automatically feel the difference. The other thing is, when you're trying to make those interesting decisions, like we talked about, like Cody is doing, the balance is still just absurdly different. For instance, if I was to make a fun change to the Iden box, I could make, hey, Thrawn and Bosk.
Yes.
My list is different, but I'm not really losing power. I made a slight change, but I'm not really doing anything. In order to make the Ewok box somewhat interesting, we have to go to Dean's list, which is no longer an Ewok box. We sub in Chewie, we sub in Zeb, we sub in Luke, we sub in Rebels. And now we're looking for Rebel Commandos, and now we're looking for ways to make it better. And that's where the intra versus interfaction is still there. And even with this, Inferno Squad still just lights it up. There's not really anything that Ewoks can do from a high level perspective. And on top of this, there's the odds problem, which is a map. And that's one of the issues that is interesting in the game currently, is you want interesting decisions in your list building. And there's not really an interesting decision here. It's like, I can completely switch out my list and make something different. And yes, the current Ewok list that's shown, which is Logray, Leia, Luke, Commandos, Chewie, Zeb, that's an interesting amount of change. But you're not running Ewoks anymore. You're just running kind of Rebel good things. And is that necessarily interesting?
Here's the thing about that, is that, again, with this intrafaction versus interfaction, it is very possible that when things like C-3PO were being tested, that it was felt that, okay, that this unit feels about right with this Ewok box in terms of, like, everything feels like it is around the same power level. We can see what these things are supposed to do. And, like, it feels fine. Let's ship it. But, I mean, personally, I think that C-3PO is probably the worst unit in the game currently, and we hope that he gets a huge buff. But the real thing is that you compare Ewoks, that is tested against itself, and you compare it to any other list in the game, let alone Inferno Squadron, and it just clearly does not stack up, right? Until you do something like what Dean has done, or Cody Hawkins has done, where it's like you're just entirely subbing out these lists and putting together these good stuff lists. So that shows it might be the case that these things are fine together, and in like limited testing or whatever, it seems okay. But as soon as you introduce it into a wider meta, then it becomes very clear that this thing is not going to be able to compete, right? And so that's why, for 8 months, all we've talked about, as from like a competitive standpoint, is, can it play against Iden, and how does it do on odds, right? And that just tells you that Iden is just so imbalanced in that intrafaction and interfaction sense, that all of our list building decisions focus on that choice. If you're going to a high level tournament, if you're not going to a high level tournament, doesn't matter, like, totally fine, do whatever you want. But that's all we've been able to think about and talk about because of how strong that list is.
Yep.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I'm curious, like, do you think, like, is the ideal state of a game that every single faction, every single unit is as good, in whatever objective measure of good we have, as every other unit in there? Like, is there a virtue to like some factions and some lists being better than others?
Let me answer that quickly, and then I'm interested in JK's take. So my sense is that what I think is a good form of balance is not that everything is balanced, but that things are balanced along different continuums in terms of there are some things that it's really good to have a list that is very bad in the hands of a beginner player, but very strong in the hands of a skilled player, right? Because that allows for really strong skill expression and allows for interesting, decisions that you're going to be making to be rewarded in the game, right? But it is so and I don't want those things to be balanced. I also want there to be just like an entry level list that is they're very solid, right? Mandos is a perfect example. Give someone Mandos, they should be kind of a baseline that people who are new can play, and also people who have played the game a lot can also play well, but that it doesn't all need to be perfectly well balanced. It's just the case that there needs to be there needs to be we can't have these huge outliers like what we've got, right, with Ewoks and Inferno. Like those, that's too far outside the curve. But I take your point, Scott.
Yes, and I agree with the general idea of Kenny. Uh, One is no, everything shouldn't be balanced and playable, so that everything comes down to dice roll, or something along those lines.
Great point.
But you don't want you want at least a rock paper scissors of how things play. We are Imperial Assault players. The final meta was Spectre Cell was better than everything. Before that, there was this somewhat meta of Scum versus Empire and Rebels. Scum essentially became the best. It rose out just a little bit, but all of them fought against each other. That
Totally.
doesn't mean there wasn't a lot of bad stuff out there,
Yeah.
because there was a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah.
See, that's really interesting because like my feeling is that everything should, and this is, I want to say this before we kind of move on, just because this is going to inform how I think about a lot of this discussion in terms of unit and faction balance, is that I think that every figure that is designed should have what is this figure supposed to do?
Yep.
Like, is this a tank hits and hold a point? Is this a murder thing? Is this a control thing? And everything should be equally good at accomplishing its purpose, even if those purposes are not equal. Like, so for example, if you have a figure like Ahsoka Fulcrum, like I think what has maybe underwhelmed us about Ahsoka, and she has her place, but like I think when we first saw her and talked about her as a spoiler, it was like she seems awesome.
Yeah.
She seems so cool. She seems like she's gonna murder things and get you all this force, because obviously that's her space, is to kind of move on her own, kill things, get you a ton of force back, and her ability to consistently accomplish that goal, as compared to something to Grievous, which is if you didn't kill the thing you go for, or Vader one, like there's something like variance got you, right? But
Yeah.
it feels to me like Ahsoka, like, because hey, not everything is going to succeed at what it's doing every time, because dice, and that's okay. But if something is rarely succeeding at what it's supposed to do, I think that's where I go and look. There's maybe an opportunity for a buff there.
That's a great frame, Scott. I think that the ideal of saying what does this do and it should be able to do that thing is correct. I think it's impossible to do that in terms of in reality. Like it's impossible to design things and just hit the mark every single time. But I love the idea of thinking this unit costs 3, it's a support. What should it be able to do? And then is it doing that? I do like that frame, and it will inform actually how I'm going to think about this.
Yeah, and we're I'm just gonna jump into the next section, because everything we've so this is a Dota thought. Again, this is from Kenny's brain,
Yep.
so don't trust it too much. But everything has carries, supports, and tanks. Those are the Dota terms. There are more in it. Carries has different names. Uh, Kenny, go ahead and talk about what is a carry, what is a support, what is a tank. Give me a 2-minute rundown of each of them.
Sure. So I will do it even faster. So carries are like assassins in League of Legends, right? The idea of a carry is in a game of Dota or League is that carries are taking up a lot of resources from your team. They're farming, they're spending a lot of time preparing for what they're going to do. Is they're spending a lot of time gathering resources in terms of gold and items and everything like that. And the idea is that they are going to be who you rely on to carry the game and win in the mid and late game. So we pump a ton of resources into this unit, and the idea is that we will, as the rest of the team, will protect this unit, or not rely on this unit until that unit is then able to win us the game later, right? Supports are units who their purpose is to provide resources to the team, right? Their spells are typically focused on helping your team. They're not selfish spells or not economy or anything like that. And the idea there is that these units are very strong. Like Scott said, they're very strong at what they're doing, but what they're doing typically isn't doing damage. It's assisting the team. Tanks or off lanes in Dota are the idea of this unit is that these are units that are disruptive or durable, or what they're meant to be able to do is suck up resources from the enemy team so that the enemy has to do a lot in order to bring them down, right? And so with JK's got three great examples here. Like Iden is the easy carry, right? We can look at her and say every time you pull her card, she is going to be able to do high damage. She is going to be Iden can 100% carry you the game. I mean, the idea of the early stage, mid, and late game doesn't really work as well with Shatterpoint because they're not gathering resources. It's just like get up and go. But the idea is that Iden can at all points be relied upon to do what she needs to do in terms of dealing damage, wounding units, right? That's what she's doing. Lumi is also such a perfect example of a support because her activations are pretty lackluster. I mean, some of the best things that she can do on her activation is full heal a unit. But she's durable, she's defensive, and her identity is phenomenally good. Flow of the Force is one of the strongest identities in the game. So she's giving tons of resources to her team, even if she's not adding a ton on her activations. And then Mando as a tank is perfect because what Mando can do is he is disruptive to the team. He has diceless displacement, but disruption is also about he can, when your units are wounded, he can reposition, right? And force your opponents to have to deal with him in a way that oftentimes they can't, right? So that is a kind of a loose mapping of how these things, how these roles work in Shatterpoint.
So first thing we're going to talk about, we're just going to talk about carries. So we have up here 4 examples of what we call good carries.
Yep.
They're Inferno Squad and
Yep.
Han Chewie, the support. Let's start with Han and Chewie. We've talked about Inferno Squad. What makes Han and Chewie a carry in here?
So when we're thinking about carry with the example of Shatterpoint, what we're thinking about is units that consistently do high damage, right? In order to wound units. That's what we mean, right? With a carry unit. It is a unit that I can rely on to make a play in the form of wounding units. Han and Chewie have some of the best expertise for supports in the game. Obviously, they're 5 cost. They have 10 health. Their defensive expertise is Garbo. But every time, like if you're pulling them, or if you're pulling your Shatterpoint, a lot of times one of your questions is, why would I not Shatterpoint Han and Chewie, right? And the reason why is because they can consistently hit high damage at range 5, which means that they can be relied on to make big damage swing plays at all stages of the game, even when they're wounded, right? And their force economy kind of tanks a little bit. You can still say, okay, but I can get some 2 strong attacks out of them and then possibly even refresh a force after they get a wound. So that's why Inferno Squadron, just every level of them, primary, support, secondary, they're all carries. They're all doing high damage. That's it. But Han and Chewie, I think, are a really good example of someone outside that squad that is able to hit those marks.
Scott, can you put you on a spot a little bit? Can you think of any other carries and assassins that you like in the game right now that are not necessarily in here?
Yeah, I mean, Kanan, I think makes sense. I mean, Kanan obviously has, like, I'm thinking in terms of a carry of sort of like, who's your playmaker? And I think about it was a game Ken and I were playing. I think it might have been the second Zi-Fi. It was the one where Kenny was playing Han and Kanan against me. And I was just dominating the first struggle, and it was not close. And he activates Caden and completely swings the game around. And it just comes in, and it reminded me just how impactful. And I think really, obviously, there are figures like Mando takes points. I'm not trying to say that only the carries assassins take points, but I think of a carry is going to fall under a figure where I go, I have my Shatterpoint. I need to take 2 points. Who am I picking? And I think all of these figures have opportunities and abilities to move multiple figures, do high levels of damage, and displace other people. Except for ISFs, but they just are literally the most damage dealing unit in the game.
Yeah.
They have the highest damage capacity. No one else can do 16 damage in an activation.
As we've been talking about this, again, Kenny introduced this, and I've been thinking about this, and even in this discussion, when a carry goes off, you are spending their force. You are probably ticking down the line. You are saying before the game starts, I have 3 force. Iden is going to use this force. ISF is going to use this force. Hask is going to use this force. And I'm going to make sure they use it. And with everything, there's good ones and there's bad ones.
Yeah.
I think Anakin is we're going to say bad for Anakin. He has blah, 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 we can redeem him. There's a lot of discussion about where he is going to end up falling, but you're going to put a ton of resources into him, and you're hoping that he does what he's supposed to do. Yeah. And can he pull off a super attack? Yeah, like anyone who falls into carries kind of can. But if you are investing the resources into them, are you going to be able to do that? Savage is another one. You're not necessarily using a bunch of force for him, but you see him and you go, oh, this guy's going to go up and he's going to destroy someone. And they just don't do that. And unfortunately, our boy Luke, Kenny, why is Luke a bad carry?
So the idea that, like, the thing is that what we're talking about with these carry units is that typically they are taking up resources in terms of they might not be offering a ton of out of activation movement. They might not be offering a ton of support to your team. They might not be offering a ton of diceless displacement, although they can. It's more that we're relying on them in order to deal high damage, take out enemy units that we need to be wounded or, whatever off of typically we're talking about wounding. And Luke gives no benefit to your team, right? He is not there to do anything except be a stat stick. And as a stat stick, he does not hit hard enough, right? And while he is very durable, he is very sticky, and that's kind of in the more tank offlane thing. He's not really disruptive enough, right? His identity effectively doesn't matter. And so you're relying on him to deal inconsistent levels of damage. And he just is very selfish, right? And Anakin is, I think, the best example of the failed carry, because Anakin, you can tell they meant to say, this unit is, yes, you're going to invest a ton of resources in him. His second attack is going to cost you 2 force, but you're going to be able to go in, you're going to wound primaries and secondaries, which are typically hard to bring down, and then he's going to give you this big payback. The problem, as we know, is that Anakin is very easy to condition stack. He's very easy to bring to the ground. That's kind of the same thing with Luke, unfortunately. I mean, he can clear his pin that he gets with his thing, but then if you disarm and you strain him, he's just slow. His only ability to move himself outside of his start of activation jump is the profitability. And so, like, him and Anakin both, they're easy to control. Their damage spikes are not high enough, and they consume so many more resources than they generate for your team typically, right? So that's kind of my thinking with those guys.
Okay. We have a third that we're going to talk about a little bit, who is our unique little carry, and that's Fulcrum. Scott, you talked about Fulcrum a little bit earlier. Where do you place... You had her sliding to the bad version. Scott, I'm going to ask you, do you think Ahsoka is a carry? I think she's supposed to be designed to, but is that actually her role? Is she something else? Is she good? Is she bad?
So she is designed to be a carry. Well, so here's an interesting thing, because I think, again, obviously we know that these aren't always one-to-one, because
Yes.
Kenny kind of talked about this, supports there's units that are supposed to be garnering you resources, right? And hypothetically, she is meant to be getting you extra force, right? Either to compensate for her lack or her consumption, or to provide extra force elsewhere, right? Which is awesome. That's great. But if she's not accomplishing that, then I think that makes her a bad version of the carry. I think that she does not have enough other stuff going on in order to say that she is meant to do anything other than go be a beat stick and carry. Like, she's not providing out of activation movement. She's not providing heals, cover, defensive abilities. She's not super. I mean, she's not as good as the other Ahsoka about holding on to a point. Um, so for me, yeah, her whole point is to be an assassin.
Let me say this about a Fulcrum's, because like I think Fulcrum is kind of in this midpoint where I'm not totally sure where she's going to land, right? And I think she's kind of the quintessential version of a carry in that, again, the benefit that she gives to your team is the potential for a force payback if she's able to get a wound, but she doesn't give any out of activation movement. She doesn't give her any other real benefit. The idea of her is you're going to laser her at somebody and she is going to be able to go in and wound them. So do high damage, get this figure off the board, and that will have a payoff effect, kind of like Anakin, right? Now, what we've seen, Scott referenced this, and I totally agree with him, is that we have found that her ability to climb her tree is not as consistent. Like, Iden is very consistently able to get 4 steps on burst fire, which means that she is going to wound anything with 8 health or less. Okay, that's on one attack. It is tough for Ahsoka to get 3 steps on Jarkai consistently in order to get 6 damage, right? And on her other side, reverse grip, she's doing a little bit less damage, right? So she's much less consistent about being able to hit the break points that we're thinking she needs to be able to hit in order to do what it is that she's supposed to do, which is wound units and bring them off the board. So I don't think she's as bad as Anakin is right now, or Jedi Luke, but it is very much the case that what we had initially thought would be a very strong figure has come in a lot more mid, because this role that she's supposed to fill, it doesn't look like she's able to do it as well as we would have hoped initially, right? So
Yeah, and to I don't know if devil's advocate is the right word, but it may end up being that she falls into a support role because of just 4 force. And that is who she is, and she works with and obviously we haven't seen all of the Rogue One box, but maybe she goes in there and she turns what is a very force needy box into a force heavy box. But yeah, I agree with all of you guys' sentiment in terms of she is supposed to. I'm pretty sure she's supposed to be here, but I don't know if we've found where she's supposed to be. And also, with adjustments coming up, everything could be slightly different in a month. So, but let's move on. We're going to talk about supports. Uh, so there are so many good supports in Shatterpoint. Realistically, because you can support any number of ways. We talked about Lumi. Lumi gives revenge dashes. She gives flow of the force. She has good enough force. She can use force, but she doesn't need it for her activation, but she can spike with it. Rex is an absurdly great support. Kenobi is Kenobi is the best support in the game because he has the best support's pure ability in the game. I don't think I'm ruffling any feathers with Mind Trick just being that.
Well, I don't know. I might disagree with that.
Kick it.
Why is that and I'll have Kenny explain this, because why is Kenobi not a tank?
So Kenobi probably could function as a tank, but the idea of Kenobi is that when we talk about supports, what we mean is generally they are not doing tons of damage, that the effect that they are giving to your team is more meant to support, quote unquote, your team, right? So they're not doing tons of damage. They should be giving lots of out of activation movement or some out of activation movement. They should be giving some form of economy benefit, like in the form of force or healing, right? So we think of Lumi with flow of the force. When you wound, she gives you a dash. When you are wounded, she gives you heals. We think about Princess Leia, who is giving out tons of dashes everywhere. Hera is an incredible example because she is slow, but she has one of the best abilities in the game in terms of we will not stand down. And so you would even Shatterpoint Hera, for the reason that her ability is so strong that even though she's not going to wound anybody, she can still win you the game. And so Obi-2 with Mind Trick, effectively, it is kind of a tank ability, a disruption ability, but really what you're doing is you are making all of the units around Obi so much more durable within the form of Mind Trick, right? So that's that's what I would think of if I would
Yeah,
describe him as a support.
I think that makes sense. I think I'm fine with that if it's framing because, yeah, he has run, which, while it is conditional and something he's usually using on himself, he can give movement and healing. My just thought was that when we thought of tanks as the phrase that was used was make your opponent spend resources.
Yep.
That's exactly what Mind Trick is doing. Is it is incurring a huge resource cost on your opponent. But I also see the strong argument of he is making everyone around you more durable. Although one could argue that that is maybe a spectrum because if like you're preventing any attacks, it's an incredible amount versus you're just redirecting and essentially minusing 2 dice, which um is still really great. So I'm fine with him being sports, but honestly, I think you should also include him with the tank.
I don't hate that. I'm actually going to come to a point in just a second. I think one of the things that makes a good support is that they have a little bit of flexibility and dip into the other two. They can be a little bit more of a carry. I think of Rex as I want to pour resources into Rex because Rex does cool things. I think Bo kind of has that as well. ARFs, on the other hand, I mean, ARFs are pure support. Like they are there to survive and throw out coordinated fire. Princess Leia has a little bit more carry to her. Hera has a little bit more tank. I think there's a little bit of balance in supports compared to bad supports, which legitimately offer like nothing past their support. They have this limit, and once you hit that support limit, that is all they ever offer. Again, C3PO and R2D2 are just the quintessential example of what do they give you besides steadfast slash scale, depending on which side you're on, and then an occasional maybe 5 dice attack from a support? Nothing. Like literally nothing. And Pawns is kind of the same thing, where he gives you the little bit of the forward advance, he gives you a little bit of out of activation, but what he's doing is just not enough. With that framing, why are these bad supports, Kenny?
So my thing is that when we think about Hera, Hera is not doing damage. She is a little tankier with her innate cover, but her support abilities in terms of being able to splash out mass heals, we will not stand down, are very strong abilities, right? So what's different in Shatterpoint as opposed to like Dota is that supports are not really carrying the game in games of Dota. Their idea is to shepherd your carries so that they can survive and then win in the late game, right? But supports are doing something a little bit different here. But like Hera will absolutely single-handedly win you a game with We Will Not Stand Down, right? She'll stand up Ezra, she'll advance someone else, she'll swing 4 points and win you the game. 3PO is an example of a unit that all of his abilities are support abilities, and they are all terrible. They are not properly costed or balanced. They don't do anything close to what we would think of as like a strong support ability. So yes, JK's right. He is only giving you a support ability, and it's they are bad abilities. Padme is another good example, right? Where it's like she's got coordinated fire 2 damage. This should be amazing. But when you play with her, you realize, oh, her kit is so intensely limited that she's not even, her identity doesn't work as well as you think it would. It's just not very strong, right? And she herself is super fragile. So there's just we look at these, and everywhere we look at these units, their support abilities are not as strong as other units in the game, and they are otherwise not bringing anything. So like Scott and JK both talked about how these units are bringing other things besides just their support abilities. Bad supports aren't doing that. They're just there to support, and they suck at it. So
Scott, am I missing any supports from the good or bad versions that you want to talk about for either of the reasons that we went through?
My first thought was, oh, does he have Bo-Katan on there? And I was like, yep, he's got her on there. I think that makes Perfect sense. I really like that. I think you could probably throw Thrawn in there,
Good
just
example. That's a great one.
because one, he is giving a defensive buff to anyone with an injured token. He is disincentivizing just like attacking a primary. He's increasing your force economy by giving you the ability to reroll, and he's also making it so that you are not having as much of a detriment for bad activation. So like Thrawn is the Stormtrooper Sergeant Solver because you don't have to run him. Or like you can run him, but you don't actually ever have to activate him. You can just reserve him and then shuffle your deck.
Yeah, there is probably a discussion that we could go through in another hour of the nature of supports between Empire primaries, between Thrawn and Veers and Moff, of what they are bringing and how they are fitting into where they should be. I know that was a lot of gobbledygook, but Thrawn versus Veers, who they both do stuff to supports, and then Moff punishes the other way, and even V1 is probably a carry, but his whole thing is just to make his best ability is that support ability to lift people up.
Yes.
But again, we could talk about that forever.
Yeah.
We're going to move on through.
Although Veers is a great example of a bad support, right? He is total support, and he offers one good thing, which is you get to put your Death Trooper in reserve at the start of the game, and he don't do nothing else the rest of the game, right?
So I don't know that he probably is a bad support, Kenny. You're probably right. But I am curious to see when he has units that aren't as bad, because one of the things about if you are basing your list on being able to support other things, and you're sacrificing damage and you're sacrificing, utility, then there is something to be said for the stuff you're bringing needs to be good, because it might be the fact that when we can run oops all Death Troopers, Veers gets pretty okay.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point.
Yep. Yeah, supports are obviously supporting things, and they need people around them to be better than either the anything else on the list. Lumi's been around for a long time. She's consistently looking for a home. Not that she doesn't work with everything, but she works with everything, so she's constantly looking for a home.
Yes.
Whereas I think a lot of those other ones we're looking for. They're still looking for supporting pieces around them because they fit so nichely, versus Lumi just kind of fits everywhere.
Great point.
Okay. Last section, we're going to talk about these offline tankers, initiators. We have Kanan in here. I do think Kanan is probably a carry. We're obviously making things. We're trying to balance things, and things fall into multiple things. The reason Kanan is in here, if I believe from what Kenny wanted to do, is you throw him one way and you kind of can't do anything about him once he gets there.
I was going to say, the reason why I think of Kanan as an offlane tanker initiator, I mean, Kanan is doing great damage. He really is. And so he does, like you guys said, kind of function as a carry. But it's very much the case that Kanan is able to dive into the enemy line, yeet people who are otherwise unkillable, like Kit Fisto. He can yeet them out. And then he is very difficult to remove off of points, right? And he is constantly, a good Kanan game is where he is constantly in your opponent's face. So that every time they're going to wound somebody, Kanan's going to be like, awesome, I am going to jump and I'm going to do a range 4 blast with my crit pistol, and you are going to be a super sad panda bear, right? So he is constantly disrupting what your opponent is trying to do, and your opponent has to think about it at every single step of the way. That's kind of why I think of Kanan in this offlane tanker initiator, because that's their job. The job of a tank is I need to be able to get in, I need to be able to yeet everybody away if necessary. I'm not necessarily doing super high damage, although I can, but it's much more about my ability to either mass displace or get onto a point and be very tough to move off of it.
Well, so I think of it as a situation where maybe I am thinking of carries in a different way, and I think of carries as being sort of like not jack of all trades, but almost master of all trades. Whereas like Mando, I think, is a really great example of a tanker offline initiative, because he has dice displacement. He has a lot of flexibility. He's got the revenge trigger. He's incredibly defensive. He's got a deflect ability with do the magic hand thing. He's doing crazy stuff. Like, I played on a game on Thursday where I ran what I would consider to be a support offline taker almost exclusively list, and Mando, never got attacked. But also he is not super offensive. If
Yes.
Mando was like doing 8 or 9 damage pretty consistently, 4 or 5 steps on the reg, then he might be, move more towards the assassin base, or he might just be like everything. It might just be like, all right, you can cover all roles. Versus something like Kanan, where I feel like you don't want to shoot Kanan. You don't want to get attacked by Kanan. Kanan's moving people around. It just feels like he's doing everything, and Mando's doing 2 of those things better. But those 2 things make him more like a tank. I think Fifth Brother is a perfect example of a tank.
Mm-hmm.
I think Shak T, I wouldn't have called her a tank, but I totally get why, because like she's coming with displacement. I think Shak T, she again kind of has multiple aspects of all of them, and that Shak T is like the MVP in so many of my games that I play with her, where she's like coming and doing really big swings, but she also has the support aspect of giving you an extra resource. And then she also has the tank aspect of I'm going to come and I'm going to force displace everybody around her. So,
Yeah, and I probably should have been doing this earlier as we are a YouTube and podcast, but the list of goods versions that I have currently are Kanan, Mando, Maul, Jango, Shakti, and Fifth Brother. So that is what is out there. I apologize for not calling that earlier. We basically have talked about all the other ones. Shakti, yeah, is very interesting because yeah, Kenny put her on the list, and I kind of did the same thing you did, Scott. I put her on partly on faith, but I think of these as carries go to where the where the battle is, and tanks often go to where the battle isn't, and they kind of go and they take a point and they push people away, and they stay away from the mobs a little bit more. Django is like, I mean, obviously you could probably put all of your resources ever into Django, and it's still he would want more,
Hmm.
but Django going to one spot and saying, "Nope, I'm locking that person up, and if they move, I'm going to not so fast," is the ultimate tank offline ability, and those are the sort of things that that's the perspective that I come through when I think of these offlines. I think of these tanks.
Yeah, the thing about like a tank is, remember, my thought is that we're talking about units that are either able to displace consistently a lot or some portion of units, and or being very durable, being able to stick to a point, right? So that's why Mando is kind of a perfect example of a tank,
Yep.
because he is able to do both of those things. Shock T is more on the displacement side and less on the, I mean, she's immune to expose, but she only has 8 health, like she'll go down, right? But she has Force Heat, right, or Fifth Brother, who is also durable on that point, right? So he is, these units who are able to get onto points, mass splash, or hold the point. That's kind of the framework that I think about with respect to the tank unit, right?
yeah, no, that makes sense. And again, it's not a perfect one-to-one metaphor, but it is helpful to think about. I guess like this is maybe going back to my earlier comment, what are these guys supposed to be doing and how
Yes.
reliably do they accomplish that? And I think why is Shakti very good? It's because if she's going to take a point, like she's going to take a point. And sometimes she's going to take 2, right? And same with a lot of these people. Like the good versions of things are things that are really, really consistent at doing the things that you want them to do.
Yep. I think Dark Troopers is a thing that we don't have on here that probably should, if for nothing else, then they can't be thrown off.
Yeah.
They are stuck there, and even uh, the Death Trooper escort, who is
Yep.
able to run back to a point whenever, if and when they need to. Not that it comes up super often, but those are other examples. And I
Oh,
think obviously, a lot of this is semantic discussion of where
Yeah.
we are.
yeah. Well, and I would argue that the reason it doesn't come up super often is because people recognize it and so they don't make the attack. It's as much of a deterrent as it is a countermeasure.
Yep.
Yeah, Death Trooper is an interesting example because I think he is a good example of someone that is kind of a carry and that he's doing high damage. He can get across the board to do his thing. He's also
He's
kind of a
not really
support.
doing high damage. He has
Yeah,
very consistent pushes, but
yeah,
he's often not doing more than 5 damage, which is fine. It's for
yeah,
a secondary. It's pretty middle of the road. It's just that he has accesses to pushes, pins, like,
yeah.
and reposition. So he is often able to just shut down your opponent.
Yeah. That's why I kind of equivocated because I'm like, maybe, but he's also kind of a support in that he has one of the best out of activation movements and the abilities in the game, right? And then but he is very much a disruptor in that he can dive onto your opponent's back line. I mean, from deployment, we have all done this with Death or seen this done, where he will get onto your opponent's back line, shove somebody off, and then your opponent, if you're going to try and deal with him, has to get through the fact that because of disciplined or whatever that stupid ability is, he can reposition and gain a hunker, right? So he's a very, very difficult unit to deal with.
So the Empire has the best carries, the best support carry tanks, the best tank supports, is what we're learning right now.
That's it.
We're going to go into some bad versions.
Yeah.
Chewie is the one who is the most not bad version because his issue is all the power that he brings is giving it to someone else, and he doesn't fit in a lot of spaces. He is hard to deal with when he gets there, but what is he supposed to do? He's kind of just supposed to sit with someone, and no, he doesn't die because you just don't shoot him. And there are times with these offline tankers where if there's 3 of them on one side, I'm just going to take all of the other points, and you can have it. You can have that 1 point. That's what I think about with Chewie. Asajj, the reason she's on here is she's going to spend all of your force to try and push someone off one time, and then she's just going to die, and she's not going to be very good at any of it. Uh, Honestly, Aura and Boosh, I they're both really bad, and I was trying to find a spot for them, and they both sort of felt like they fit here. They both want to do their own thing. Aura, honestly, defensively is not bad in terms of a pure tank. She just doesn't add any other value. And I did want to bring up Kit Fisto as the new one, kind of the same with Fulcrum of where does he fit. Uh, Scott, what are your thoughts on these bad versions? And I don't know if you've even looked at or played Kit Fisto yet, but run me through it. Yeah.
I think Kit Fisto's a great tank. I think the problem is that his list needs him to be way more than a tank. Like Kit Fisto, like, is gonna force speed his way over to where you're at, and then he is gonna be incredibly defensive. And then other things, I mean, it's kind of a support thing, but he's going to be over here giving out coordinated fire dash. So I really like him in that space. The problem is he needs to do more, or he needs to have not freaking Nader as his secondary with Phil's clones, who I don't care what Matt says, they're terrible.
Let me say make a few comments about each of these. So I think that Chewie is I'm not sure he's a bad tank, but the stats aren't backing me up really, but like he's on the line. Chewie's thing is he is very durable, okay? But his problem is that once he is off a point, he doesn't add any out of activation movement. He doesn't punish your opponent for attacking him, and he's not as durable as something like Mando, right? It is easy to shove Chewie off of a point. It is not easy to shove Mando off of a point, right? It is easy to displace him. It's not easy to displace Fifth Brother, right? Unless you have diceless displacement, right? So, and then like the thing with Asajj is she is meant to be able to, I've got 4 seed, I've got like all these, like I've got tons of jumps, so I should be able to get places, displace people, do all that thing. She soaks up so many resources, and then her attacks are lackluster. She is extremely frail, right? So you think about a thing like Shock T. Shock T is just a better version of Asajj in every single way, right? She can displace more people. Her attacks are just as consistent, and she is more durable. Kit Fisto, I actually think I don't think he's like great, but me and Sam have been playing a lot, and I played against Matt, and they are both loving Kit Fisto. Kit Fisto is, in my opinion, the hardest unit to displace off of a point in the game. Okay, and I include figures like Dooku. I mean, we can think about Mando. I include Mando in this list. Kit Fisto, because of his defensive kit, he can either have steadfast or he's got immunity to pin, and he is, if he's on Chicho, he's adding a expertise, which means that even if you expose him, he still gets +2 block. So it is so much the case that even if you're making strong ranged attacks, he is very tough to get double shoves into, right?
Kenny,
And,
you forgot the part where he gets steadfast on Chicho.
yeah, and yeah, exactly right. So he's just so difficult to deal with. Now, he is not gonna swing multiple points. He can't be like Mando where he's gonna diceless somebody and then, do everything. But once Kit is on a point, that dude ain't getting off of a point. And I have learned that. I'm like, okay, if this is gonna be the next meta, I need to have like 3 forms of diceless displacement, because Kit, you just can't attack him, right? Whereas like Scott brought up this comment a few months ago where, like, with Dooku, he's like, well, it's a range meta now, and I don't have a problem making range attacks into Dooku. You can't really do that with Kit Fisto, right? Maybe Inferno Squadron can kill everybody, but Kit Fisto is very, very good.
I think even Inferno Squadron would really struggle to kill Kit.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Kit's great. There's a lot out there that is still in question as to where his fit is.
Yes.
But that's not this episode. We'll worry about that later. Yeah, this has been very cool. I've liked where this has gone. We're gonna close up. We're gonna have some final thoughts. I think one of the big things that we want to talk about while we're doing this isn't these are good, these are bad. That's not what this is. I think there is a balance in all things. I think if you are looking at your list and you're saying, I have to spend 9 force, I have 3, you have a problem. You've got to look for ways to adjust it. If you have 7 force and you're using 4 of it and you have 3 that's kind of just floating, I know that doesn't happen all the time, but I've absolutely played Ewoks and ended with 2 or 3 extra force at a time. Then you need to adjust yourself and think, okay, I need to actually maximize my thing.
So the thing is that what we talk about so much of, as we talk about things on the Slack and, in whatever communities we're talking about units, is that we're thinking about them in terms of like Scott said it best, like, what is this unit meant to be doing, right? Why is it that Hera is, in my opinion, as good as a unit like Vader 2? Why is that the case? Even though he is dealing 87 damage to whoever he wants. You want to actually talk about a unit that can wound Kit Fisto, it's actually Vader 2. Like, he can actually pretty consistently do it in terms of the math. But like, why is it that these units are as good as they are? Why is it that Lumi keeps showing up in all of these lists, even though her activations are so lackluster? And when you start to think, like, here's a good example, like Mando, who has tons of play. He is probably in competitive tournaments over the last 3 or 4 months the most played unit in the game. He has around a 50% win rate. Why is that, right? Like, it's because that what he is doing is he is bringing this very particular ability to the game in terms of defensiveness and the ability to initiate and move people, but he is not spiking for high damage. He is not able to give out these mass game winning abilities in the form of like Hera's "We Will Not Stand Down" or Princess Leia dashing everybody. And so, it's like it's a paradigm. It's a way to think about these different classes of units. And if you've got a squad, so for example, a good example is something like Obi Batch, where you have kind of one carry in the form of Obi-Wan, who is also a support. Like, he's offering these support abilities, and he's kind of a tank, and that he's hard to deal with. But like, he's kind of your only carry, really, in terms of these high damage spikes. And that you think about that, and you're like, am I okay with that? Am I okay with the fact that I've only got one of these units that I can consistently rely on to do this thing? Do I have enough support? Like right now, when I am list building, I think, do I have 2 forms of out of activation movement at least? And if I don't, then I really need to think about how I'm going to make up for that. And so it's just more of a rubric to think of. You need a balance. You need all of these things as you're list building, and thinking what makes one thing good versus another thing not quite so good, as these interclass comparisons. That's my thought on that.
Perfect. Scott, final thoughts?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about, like, if someone is listening to this and going, okay, well now I know that Kenny likes MOBAs.
Yeah.
And well, good to know that everyone thinks so and so is an assassin. It's like, all right, how do you like translate that, right? And I think what Shatterpoint is like every other competitive game that has ever existed in the history of humanity, which is that Black Lotuses are the best thing, right? Like,
True.
For anyone who doesn't know, which, I mean, if you're listening to this, you don't know at least a little bit about Magic, good for you. So in Magic the Gathering, the card that is banned in every format except the one that lets everything in, and even then you can only have one copy, is the Black Lotus. And you'd think like, oh, what does it do? Auto win the game or like summon your whole deck? And it's like, no, you can play it for 0 and it gives you 3 resources. And it's like, why is that the most ultimate banned thought card ever? It's because it's incredibly consistent. It jumpstarts your game and is incredibly consistent. And that's the thing, is that like Aiden isn't good because she has a high ceiling. Aiden's good because she very consistently provides you that value.
Great
right?
point.
And like, if you have a figure and you go, I can take that point no matter what, that's consistency. And so it's like, you want to list build with the thought of like, do I have something to support my stuff? Do I have something to be a tank? Do I have something to be an assassin? Because you want a wide range of things to accomplish and meet different situations, because you can be an amazing tank all day long on first contact, and they're going to just change which points are active and your tank is going to be worth nothing.
Great
so you
point.
need to have something to, be flexible and adapt. And the measure is that, all right, I've got all that, and you just need to find the thing that is most going to consistently do that. So that's my thoughts.
Great point.
Yeah, great point, Scott. And yeah, that's my general idea as well. Shatterpoint is really about it's about maximizing each activation. You don't have control over where they're going per se. There is some math involved in different ways, but making sure that you are ready for whatever is about to come and being able to put yourself in the right position. And that is really, again, the more I thought about this through the week as we talked about wanting to do this, is what this is about. It's okay, if I have a carry, what do they need to do in order for me to actually invest resources into them? If I'm putting 3/4 into them, what does that look like? Oh, well, it should look like I'm taking 2 to 3 points. If I'm going to have a tank who is going to sit on a point, what does that require? How much do I think it's going to take from the opponent? If I have a support, how much are they going to move things around? And that's really the balance. Obviously, there's a finite number of figures, there's a finite number of cards, there's a finite number of combinations that you can run through. But as you're list building, it is just really about thinking how you're raising your floor of each activation. I thought this was a blast, and if you guys didn't, then that's on you. Re-listen to it and see if you get something better out of it next time.
That's exactly right.
Watch it on a different platform.
Yeah.
And that was probably your problem, is you didn't watch it on you watched it on YouTube and not on Spotify. So try again. And then if that didn't work, Apple Music. And in the meantime, we appreciate you guys. Please rate and review the podcast on all the different forums. Join the Slack, join the community, go out, play, go have fun, try new things. Kenny, say goodbye.
Everyone, we are so looking forward to the balance patch. We love you all. Have a wonderful week. Happy Easter.
Scott, say goodbye.
My big takeaway from this is that JK is a better host than Kenny or I, and thanks so much, everybody.
Rude.
I have to provide something, or else I get kicked out of the podcast.
True.
We love you all and have a wonderful, wonderful week.